How do you tap into home equity to be able to get money to start a business or even grow an existing business? That's exactly what we're going to dive into today's training. By the end of this training, you're going to know several different ways you can actually tap into the equity or the value of your home to be able to get money, whether it be a line of credit or whether it be a loan that you can actually use to either start a brand new business or to be able to actually grow an existing business. We're even going to talk about some alternative funding options using home equity that a lot of business owners don't know about. And we're going to talk about other solutions outside of tapping into home equity that you can also use to get your business off the ground or to grow an existing business. We got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. So are you a homeowner? Well, do you have extensive, or I should say significant equity in your home? Or do you have a home that's worth way more than what you actually owe? Well, then you probably already know that your home's equity has value in itself. And some business owners, maybe you haven't thought about actually tapping into that home equity to start a business. Now, this could be borderline controversial, right? Because a lot of people might think it's controversy. They don't want to actually tap into home equity to fund a business. I get that. Actually, my first business I ever owned, I tapped into the equity of my home using one of these solutions and got the business off the ground, built it up to a 7-figure business, but the business failed. So what happens then? Well, those are the type of things that we're going to be talking about today. So there are two main types of funds you can get out there using your home equity. And I'm going to end up telling you about a third one as we get ready to close today that a lot of business owners don't know about. Okay, these are basically second mortgages on your house, the first two options we're going to talk about. So a home equity loan is the first one we're going to discuss, and that's a fixed rate. And with a fixed rate amount, a fixed payment schedule. So you're issued a loan, and like, excuse me, all loans, there's a set loan amount. Let's say it's $50,000 and your payment is set. You pay X amount of interest on that $50,000 and your payment ends up being so much money depending on the term that the actual loan is over. Okay. And it's a one-time lump sum loan that's repaid monthly. And that way it's a lot like a regular mortgage. It's just a second mortgage. So when we look at this funding options, we basically look at the equivalent of a home equity loan on your house. So it's just what it sounds like. We're tapping into the equity that's already available in your home, and we're getting a loan against that equity. Now, this is a second position mortgage, which means the first position mortgage is obviously the first mortgage that you have on the house. So you have your mortgage on the house. You've paid that down. Now the house is worth way more than what you actually owe. There's equity in the home, and a second home equity loan is basically taking a second position and you're borrowing against that equity to be able to get a loan. And because it's a loan, it's based on a set term, 15 years, for example, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's a set interest rate, let's say 3%, 4%, 5%, whatever it may be, which gives you a set monthly payment. Boom, you get the loan. Here's all your money. Here's the monthly payment based on whatever term you have. Now, the second option that we're going to dive into is a HELOC. And again, I'll talk to you about a third option that a lot of people don't know about as well before we wrap up. But a HELOC works more like a credit card. It's a variable interest rate. You can use the equity when you need it. It's up to a predetermined amount. So you might get up to $50,000, but it's a credit line, basically. So you're not making payments on what you're not actually using. You could borrow against it for a certain period of time, and that's usually for about 5 to 10 years. So when we look at a loan on the second, or a second mortgage loan or an equity loan is basically over a set period of time, and it's a set interest rate, a set payment. A HELOC is where you have an open line of credit you could use using the equity as collateral. It's up to a certain amount. Let's say they give you a line of credit for up to 50 grand. Well, you only pay on what you use. So if you only use 5,000 of that 50 grand, then you're only paying interest and payments on that 5,000, not the full 50,000. So the difference between a HELOC and an actual equity line or an actual equity loan is an equity loan. You get all the money and you start paying on all the money right away. With a line, you could be approved for up to $50,000, for example. Okay, but you're only making payments on what you use, so you don't have to start using the money and getting a return on it right away. Now, you're only charged interest when you withdraw funds, and you only pay interest during the draw period. So you're only paying interest on the money of the line you actually use, not the total line amount. Hence, the monthly payments are lower while we are not repaying principal. Works better for a startup. So if you're going to start a business, you have a choice. You'd rather go with a line because you only pay on what you actually use. You're not in a hurry to start paying a loan back really quick because you have a line of credit. You can tap into it as you need it. You're only making payments on what you're actually using. So after the draw period, it converts to a fixed rate loan for repayment of the principal. Okay. And during the time you're repaying the principal, you can no longer withdraw funds. That's the way home equity lines of credit work. You must pay off the entire balance first. And with a HELOC, the interest rate will typically vary. It's typically what we call an ARM, or an adjustable rate mortgage. So as a result, your costs will go up or down based on the prime interest rate. Depends on what's happening. Right now, people that have ARM loans are doing really good. Okay, because right now the prime interest rate is very low. So because prime is low, a lot of people that are paying lines or ARM loans, or they have mortgages with variable interest rates, are paying 2-3% interest rates. But when rates go up, that's when ARM loans can really cost you some money. And you see, home equity line of credit with variable interest rates can kind of be a nuisance, because you never know what the interest rate is going to be. You never really know what a payment on $10,000 may be. It could go up or down depending on what the prime interest rate is. Hello, thanks for coming in, Shane. And La Russia. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but thanks for coming in from Facebook. Michelle, thanks for coming in from YouTube. And Gabri Brooke Anderson, thanks for coming in from Facebook. I love seeing you. I haven't seen you in a while. So, however, a home equity line of credit has higher payments than a HELOC. Okay, this is because you're repaying both principal and interest. Okay, so when we look at the home equity loan, it has higher payments than the home equity line of credit, because you're paying on everything, right? Okay, so for both of these, the home serves as collateral, but obviously the payments on a loan are going to be higher because you're paying on the full amount. And with a home equity line of credit, you're only paying on a smaller amount, whatever you're borrowing against that line. Now, let's talk about business loans compared to these. Well, traditional small business loans require a lot of paperwork, okay? A bank may require projection of income, personal financials, business leases, business plans, 2-3 years worth of tax returns. Well, the smaller and newer a business, the less likely is you have those things. So a lot of funding options for business, for starting a business especially, are tough to get, because you're not able to provide all the documentation you need, or you provide less documentation, go with an alternative loan or line, and you end up paying a way higher interest rate, which makes it harder to make those payments because you're just starting your business. Okay, home equity could just be a lot easier to get. It might be something you already have. And I personally think that anybody that has a lot of equity in their home should have a home equity line of credit. Even if you don't use it, having that line of credit available for times when you need it, like COVID hits or any of those type of things, definitely makes sense. It's definitely useful to have. So home equity lenders aren't connected with your business plan. They just want to know about your personal resources. They're going to typically qualify you based on personal credit and income, or your ability to repay it. And they're going to want a value done on the house, evaluation and appraisal, obviously, to make sure that they're lending you up to whatever percent that they'll lend based on the value of the home. So if you have the income, equity, and credit rating to repay the loan, well, then you're likely to get the loan or line of credit. Home equity interest rates are lower than most business loans, and that's because mortgage lender isn't taking on as much risk, because, again, if you ever default, they just come after your home, which we're going to talk about the risks that you face in this as well. So again, interest rates are typically better, easier money to obtain than what you're going to find in a lot of the business space, which is why some of these things, this option may make sense over some other options that are available. Now, if your business fails or isn't successful, well, you still have to repay the loan or you lose the home. Okay, and the low interest rates offered on HELOCs can be misleading. This because the rates vary during the loan period. So you have to be careful. And that's why whenever you're looking at rates on any kind of loan, you always want to look at what's called an APR. An APR actually calculates in all the interest you're going to pay and all the fees. It's the best reflection you have of total money you're really going to pay back to a lender. Okay, but I've actually been in this situation. So I actually used a home equity line of credit to get my mortgage business off the ground, grew it, made a lot of money. Okay, was able to get the business to 7 figures plus. Then the mortgage crisis occurred, and then the business failed, right? So now I had extra money in the value of my home. My mortgage payment was higher than it should be because I used it to fund the business. Now, I didn't end up losing the home out of it, okay, as a result. But the problem is then, as I'll get into, you might owe more than the home is worth. So these are drawbacks that you have to look at, is that if the business fails, you still have to repay that loan or you lose your home, right? So that's obviously a real negative drawback if you're going down one of these avenues. Now, most equity loans are fixed and have simple interest, but most HELOCs are offered, talking about, as we mentioned, variable interest rates. This makes them similar to credit card accounts, as all lines of credit are. Okay, so the line accumulates far more quickly, okay, based on that, depending on how much you're actually putting on the line. Now, a home equity loan may be best for one-time expenses, and HELOCs may be better for business owners to use as cash reserves over time. And that's what I mentioned is, hey, get a home equity line of credit. I always recommend getting any line of credit you can, because it doesn't hurt you. You're not making payments on it unless you actually use the line, and having that money available makes a lot of sense when the economy changes or things come up that are unexpected. So money from a home equity line or loan or line of credit can be used any way you wish, while business loans may be restricted in their use. So the interest on a home equity line of credit may be tax deductible. So some things to think about. Almost all interest on mortgages is tax deductible, whereas it's not necessarily on the personal side for a business, although a lot of interest you accumulate on loans or lines of credit for your business are tax deductible for the business. So some things to think about there as well. And some business loans like SBA, they have a restriction of how you can use those funds. But if you get a line of credit, whether it be a general line of credit or whether you get a HELOC, for example, using your home as collateral, well, they're not as restrictive on funds. So some reasons you might want to consider this option versus regular business loans or credit lines. So you don't have to pay a HELOC down to zero every year, as business credit lines may require that you do so. Okay, interest paid on home equity debt can generally be deducted up to $100,000. Another thing to think about here is that a lot of credit lines can be called due at any time. So if you go get a credit line to start a business for 20 grand, that lender at any time can say, okay, we're calling the line due. You have 30 days to pay us that full 20 grand that's outstanding on that credit line. So some things to think about there. Okay, interest paid, as I mentioned, on home equity debt can generally be deducted up to $100,000 or $50,000 if you're married and filing separately per the IRS. And interest paid on bank loans, personal loans, credit cards, and other types of loans isn't deductible. But sometimes, depending on the business loan, your accounting, the way that your accounting is set up, you might be able to deduct the interest on a business loan for the business, but you can't do that personally. So the flexibility with home equity borrowing means that when pledging your home as collateral, the debt generally can't be discharged in bankruptcy. Some things to think about if the business fails. Plus, you can't refinance or consolidate without at least 2 years of profits as shown on your tax returns. And if you use a HELOC to finance your business, pay very close attention to making sure the business is profitable as quickly as possible, because you don't want to lose your home, right? Okay, and get into a position to refinance or pay off the debt as soon as you can to mitigate personal risk. So it's a big question. Should you take on that kind of personal liability? Should you put your home on the line to be able to start a business and get it off the ground? Should you tap into stocks? Should you tap into bonds and IRAs and 401ks that you set aside to be able to be your retirement? Should you tap into those things to grow a business? I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, this is controversial because a lot of people look at this one way or the other, that it's not worth the risk, that you should never jeopardize your home. You should never jeopardize your retirement savings to be able to fund a business, okay? It's hard to tell entrepreneurs that because we have great ideas. And the reality is that a lot of times we're willing to sacrifice almost anything to go be of service, be of help, and to be able to grow our businesses. So I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I'm going to show you the pros and the cons of it and let you know that there are options out there. A lot of people are asking me about doing this, and you absolutely can do it. But a lot of people ask, and I will tell you about a third option here. Hey, how do I use my home as collateral to get a business loan? And my answer is this. If you look at the definition of a mortgage is using a property as collateral for the debt. So when you're talking about using a home as collateral to get money for a business, you've defined a mortgage. Using a home as equity for a debt, that is a mortgage. So when we really talk about, and I'll give you another option here, but when we really talk about using your home as collateral to get business financing, we've got to tap into these options first. Simply an equity loan, an equity line of credit. These are the most two common and easier to get options where you can tap into that home's equity and get money for a business. So definitely some disadvantages here. Going underwater, if you tap into your home's equity and later the value declines, then you could owe more than your home's actually worth. Okay, the house I'm in right now is that situation. It's actually upside down because I used equity to be able to grow that business that didn't end up actually working out. Okay, so that's a perfect example. It's usually called being underwater or being upside down in your mortgage. Closing cost, fees, home equity loans can serve as a second mortgage. So just like your primary mortgage, there's closing costs, right? I mean, you can pay between 2 and 5% closing costs. Then you have interest on top of that. It could definitely be expensive. So the cost of getting the money is another disadvantage. There could be an early termination fee. So even if you get the loan and don't use it, you could end up paying a fee. So that's something that's negative as well. You're left with these fees by trying to pay it off early because maybe you didn't need the money when you thought you did need the money. Okay, so risky businesses, not a good idea to get a home equity line of credit. You don't want to jeopardize your home if you're in a business that's inherently very risky. As a matter of fact, really risky businesses, you're better off to go with angel investors to get the business off the ground, or venture capitalists once the business is off the ground. Hence, a new product which may not catch on with consumers should be financed in some other fashion. So again, you might want to avoid this if you're dealing with high risk industries and go with something like angel investing instead. Or maybe, rather a business in a well-known and used service center, such as dry cleaning, would be a better choice. So if you're, starting a franchise, it's kind of got a proven model, for example, well, this might make more sense to tap into, because most franchises that you tap into need $50,000 to $500,000, $1 million plus in money. Well, franchises are a proven model, right? If you buy a McDonald's, they're giving you the recipe to succeed like all other McDonald's succeed. Not to say you guaranteed will, but that's more predictable. It's less risky than, starting a brand new business in a brand new niche to see how it's going to work. So again, you're going to basically have less risk if you're getting into something more secure, and it's tough to get into a business that's secure unless it's something like a franchise or something that has a proven model. Okay. Also keep in mind that per Forbes, these are harder to get right now, even though a good 45 million American homeowners have about 6.3 trillion in available equity. As of May 1, after raising the lending standards in April, JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo temporarily are not accepting applications for new HELOCs. And that was during COVID. A lot of these have opened up. A lot of the revolving credit cards and credit lines have opened up. But as we are hopefully getting to the tail end of COVID, it's something to keep in mind is that home equity line of credit aren't the easiest type of money that you're able to get right now. Now, Virginia says, I have a $60K HELOC on a $500,000 mortgage, and it's currently valued at $750,000. That's fantastic. And that's a great idea. And so I love what Virginia said here. She goes, hey, look, I have a house that's worth $750,000. I owe $500 on the mortgage. I have $250,000 in equity in the home. And she's got a HELOC for $60,000. So even if she used all of the HELOC, she still has $190,000 in equity. And that's the way it's going to be. Because what happens is nobody's going to let you take a home equity line of credit up to 100% of what you owe. If your house is worth, for just simple numbers, $100,000, and you have a first mortgage for $50,000 on that house, nobody's going to let you get a home equity line of credit or a home equity loan for another $50,000, where you owe in your first and second mortgage exactly what the property's worth. Almost all of them are going to do exactly what Virginia said here. They're going to come in and say, okay, we'll give you a home equity line of credit up to 75% of the value of the home. So you have a house that's worth 100, you owe 50, you might get a home equity line of credit for 25,000. They're not going to give it to you for 100% of the value. You're still going to have equity there. So in Virginia's example, even if she defaulted on her, even if she maxed out her $60,000 home equity line of credit, she still has $190,000 in equity in the home. She could still get out of the house, sell the house, and still have nearly $200,000 worth of equity sitting there. So that's kind of more of a conservative risk. She wants to tap into the equity to have it there when she needs it. Okay, but she's not going to max out and take a really high line of credit. She doesn't need one. That leaves a lot of equity in the home. It still leaves her first mortgage, and it gives her access to a line of credit when she needs it without a ton of risk, because, again, she's still got $190,000 in equity in the home outside of her $60,000 home equity line of credit. So I love that example, Virginia. I appreciate that. Okay, Gabby Brooks says, I'm considering doing one on a $225,000 mortgage that was appraised at $507 2 years ago. And that's perfect. And she's a perfect example. So Gabby is giving a perfect example here of, hey, I have a $225,000 mortgage, a house that's worth double that, $500,000. I'm thinking about getting the line of credit. So these are very good examples from Virginia here and Brooke of exactly why you use a home equity line of credit. Even when they get the line of credit, they still have a ton of equity left in their house. So it reduces their risk and still gives them access to a line of credit for the reason that they need it for. So cash out refinancing is another way that you can get money in out of your primary home. Okay, it replaces the old loan with a new loan. So with this one, instead of getting a second mortgage, a second loan, or a line of credit that's a second position to the first, and this one we refinance the first mortgage, we get a low interest rate, and we take cash out. So now our mortgage payment reflects that we actually took that money out. Okay, and we have a big chunk of cash that we can use for whatever reason. So the difference between what was borrowed and what it takes to pay off the previous loan goes into the borrower's pocket, no strings attached. So that's another option here. We've talked about a equity loan, second position, that taps in and gives you a loan against the equity. We talked about an equity line of credit or a HELOC, more common to tap into that equity. Now we talked about just refinancing the whole mortgage. Now, I can tell you, owning a mortgage company in the past, that refinances can make a lot of sense and they might not. First, you got to look at the fees. You got to look at all the fees involved with that mortgage to see if that's worth it. Okay. The second thing that you have to take into account is, why are you doing the mortgage? Is it because the interest now is so much different than what you had? If you had a 6, 7, 8% mortgage years ago, and now interest rates are 2 or 3% like they are, that might make sense for you to refinance. The savings might outweigh the cost of doing the loan. But you have to think about how long you're going to be in that house. Look at how much the total money is going to cost you to get that refinance. And then you've got to really look at, how much money you're saving in lowering of interest rate, which is primarily why people refinance, and make sure that it's worth it. But this is another way to tap in and take cash out of the home. So again, one other way I want to tell you is that we've got lenders out here that a lot of people don't know about. There are business lenders that will also tap into the equity of the home and give you an equity loan or an equity line of credit that are private investors. They are not lenders. So most of the stuff we talked about today is, comes from big banks. It's a home equity line of credit. It's a home equity loan. It's a refinance. And it typically comes from, banks that issue mortgages, including Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. But there are alternative options from private investors where they will do a line of credit against equity in your home. You could typically get up to 65% loan to value total, sometimes 75%. Okay. But the interest rates are definitely higher. You might pay 5 to 8%, whereas some of these options we talked about today could be less than 5%. So a friend of mine, he owns zoos and owns aquariums all over the country and even outside of the country. And he has a house that he owned free and clear, and said, how do I tap into that house? I can't get a mortgage because they want all kinds of income verification and stuff that I don't want to provide. So how do I do it? Well, we found a business lender that would absolutely do that for him. The interest rate was higher, and I talked to him about that. But the nice thing is, he didn't have to provide all the documentation he had to provide for a mortgage, and was still able to leverage the home to get a line of credit. So there are alternative lenders and investors out there that will do these kind of loans outside of the big banks. They're easier to qualify for, but you just need to have a lot of equity in your home. So alternatives, well, again, taking your home out as collateral for a business loan might not be something that a lot of people want to do. So maybe you want to do this with stocks, bonds, IRAs. Okay, that's another option. There's a way where you can borrow against a 401k or IRA and get up to 100% of the value of that with a 5% interest rate loan or credit line. You could borrow against stocks and bonds and get up to 90% of the value of the stocks and bonds with a low interest rate credit line of 5%. What's nice about stocks and bonds is that you still earn the interest on the on that you're earning on the stocks and bonds now. The only way you lose is if you default. They take back the stocks and the bonds. So these are some other ways that you can leverage other assets outside of your home to qualify for a mortgage or to qualify for loan that you can use to start a business or get it off the ground. We can also look at peer-to-peer lending. Places like Funding Circle will lend up to $500,000 that you're able to get in a loan or a credit line up to $250,000 with rates that even are available less than 5%. Upstart does these for startups up to 35 grand. You're also able to get Lending Club and Prosper. They offer personal or business loans that are peer-to-peer lending as well. And peer-to-peer lending is individuals like you and I that put in little amounts of money, and then the peer-to-peer lending like Funding Circle pulls that money together and lends it to people. So I like this as an alternative because you can get it even as a newer business. Places like Lending Club and Prosper have personal and business loans, so you can tap into either one. You can get these as a newer business. As I mentioned, Upstart is a great source for startup businesses. Loans up to 35 grand. They really like young professionals. They really like college graduates. So these are some options here to other than using your home as collateral. And then another option is credit line hybrid, where you leverage your credit as collateral as a startup business. So if you have a 680 FICO score higher, a guarantor, family member, friend, investor around you has that score, you can leverage that to be able to get 5 to 8 times the amount of your highest credit limit, which is up to $150,000, 0% rates, no documentation means no bank statements, no tax returns. You can get it as a startup, and you could take the cash out of this. So even if you want to be a real estate investor, you could take all the cash out and use it to buy real estate. So I wanted to show you these options because 401k, IRA, stocks, bonds, peer-to-peer lending, credit line hybrid, these are all options here that also work for startups. And the title of this really is, how to tap into a line of credit to start a business. So if you need money to start a business, these are some alternative options that could work for you as well. And Brooke says, oh, I'm only requesting 50,000 as well. And this is, again, her example. She owes 225. She's only going to ask for 50,000. 275,000 is what she'd owe on a house that's worth 507,000. So another, again, perfect example of why you might want to do this. So as we talked about, credit line hybrid's another option as well. 680 FICO score or higher is what they're looking for. And then, of course, don't forget about business credit. Every startup business can build credit for your business that's not linked to your personal social. Okay, then you can get vendor credit. You can get credit with almost every major retailer. You can get a Visa card or MasterCard. You can get auto financing. You can get fleet credit to put fuel and repair vehicles and maintain vehicles. So business credit's another great solution for startups to be able to tap in and get money as well. And you don't need to have good credit. You don't need cash flow. You don't need collateral to be able to get approved. You can tap in and get vendor, store, fleet, cash credit, auto financing, all that, even as a new business. So don't feel compelled that you have to tap into the equity of a home. I wanted to talk to you about how to do that if you do want to do it. We talked about 4 options. We talked about a refinance, talked about a home equity line of credit, we talked about an equity loan, and we talked about private investors that will do lines of credit as well, where it's easier to qualify for the banks. But outside of those, if you want to start a business, you don't want to tap into the equity of home, let's not forget about other assets you may have, 401k, stocks, IRAs, bonds. Someone around you might have those, and they pledge those. You can use their collateral to get money. And don't forget about all the options business credit gives you as well, because it's even more creative ways you can get money to start a business where you don't have to tap into the equity of a home. So home equity loans and lines of credit are the most common types of loans to tap into equity of a home. They're both essentially second mortgages where the property serves as collateral. Okay, you're also able to come in and get a cash out refinance to refinance the entire mortgage. You're also able to tap into private investors that will then use that equity, and much easier to qualify for loans. And let's not forget about all the options to start businesses where you don't have to do that. 401k, stocks, IRAs, bonds, even business credit, and using your consumer credit for credit line hybrid. All those are really good options as a startup to be able to get money. So if you need help getting financing, give us a call, 877-600-2487. You can also go to creditsuite.com/get funding, creditsuite.com/get funding. You fill out a handful of questions. We'll tell you all the funding you can qualify for now. We never charge you a dime to get money. Don't get me wrong. The lender's going to charge you rates and terms and fees and stuff like that. We negotiate that to even get that as low as you're going to get, and as low as we can get for you. And so it basically costs you nothing to work with us. And we develop a business blueprint. We kind of map out everything in this business blueprint you need to improve your fundability and get the money that you can get now, and even work towards getting SBA loans. So again, it's like having a free resource where we help you through this process, get you access to every legitimate funding program through over 1,000 different funding sources, and you never even pay for our service. Okay, sometimes the lenders pay us a referral fee, sometimes they don't. But again, that's something that we really think is very important, is for you to have access to all funding options in one place. And that's one of the things that Credit Suite does for you. Did you get value from this? Hit the like button, hit the love button. That's all I ask. Please, I'm looking at you. Hit the like button, hit the love button. It just takes like less than a second, like a millisecond. And then share it if you really got value from this. And you can also like and subscribe. If you go to our social channels at the top right of our page, creditsuite.com, you can like and subscribe on our channel. If you subscribe on YouTube, click the bell and then click all to get notified when we go live. And you can see our daily tips on places like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can access hundreds of training videos on YouTube. You can go into my LinkedIn, where I'm constantly putting a lot of fresh content every single day as well. And you can go access our podcast, the Business Credit Financing Show. There's over 400,000 downloads, so it's very popular. And that's the only format where I invite guests on and I do one-on-one interviews with all these really cool, smart experts that teach us how to manage our money, how to increase profitability, how to run Facebook ads, how to exit our business with maximum value. All those kind of things happen on our podcast, the Business Credit Financing Show. And you can access all of that at the top right of our page, creditsuite.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited that you were able to join me today. And I look forward to talking to you next training. We're talking about more cool ways to get money to grow your business. Thanks.